You are listening to the Cresco Wealthcast, a podcast brought to you by Cresco Wealth Management of Wellington Altus Private Wealth. I'm your host, Dimitri Karolis, and I wanted to bring a podcast from the world of wealth that was really just easy to follow. And from time to time, I'm going to be bringing in members of the team. We'll be bringing in external guests and really providing some good information that are inspired from those coffee talk conversations that not just we're having, but that you're having as well. You can follow the podcast on www.cresco.podbean.com, or if you're on Spotify, you can just search for the Cresco Wealthcast. And last but not least, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel on Instagram, which is at the Finance Greek. Okay, well, we got video, so you're a familiar face, but for all of us listening, it's going to be a familiar voice. But it seems like the scenery has changed. I just want to welcome back Trust and Estate Lawyer Christianne Murphy. Tell us where we're at right now. What's exciting to start the new year?
Hello, everyone. Lots of exciting things going on so far in 2024. I have moved over to join Underwood Gill Home Estate Lawyers, so that's very exciting.
Congrats.
Thank you. And yeah, so far so good. We're busy helping people, and there's lots of people out there to help. 50% of people don't have a will. Did you know?
That's insanely high to me.
It is.
That's insanely high because it's talked about so much. Oh, do you have a will? Oh, I should have a will.
Yeah.
Is it procrastination?
I think there's a combination of factors going on in our society. Obviously, people don't like to dwell on death, unfortunately. 100% of Canadians will die at some point, so more than 50% should have a will. But really, I think there's maybe a bit of a bad reputation out there for what it involves, and that it can be a stressful and time-consuming process. And maybe some of the older school ways of doing this process were more stressful and time consuming. But nowadays there are a lot of people, myself included, who like to do a more kind of laid back conversational approach where you just get to know the clients and walk them through the plan. And usually the feedback I've had is that this wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So, right. So there's no need to be scared to get your will done. It's all good. And it's a responsible part of adulting, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, and this is perfect. This is exactly why we're here. I mean, number one, you have the most views and listens on the Cresco Wealthcast.
Woo!
So you get to take that top spot. We had incredible feedback. And then it just so happened after the podcast, just regular conversations then when we check in with clients and when we're looking at aggregate financial planning. And more, I realized a lot of people don't really know the starting point. And I think to what you just said, all of a sudden we're saying, okay, well, I put in my head, I either don't want to face something, it feels like it's a daunting task. So let's scale it back. Today we'll be talking about just the steps that are involved from the moment from a thought to, okay, what actually happens in that approach that you take, that very nice, easy, soft landing approach. Let's get your will done. What do they need to know? I leave the floor to you, Senator.
Okay. All right. Let's get into it then. So the first thing that you should really think about when you're doing your will is just understanding what is going to be in the will. Obviously, at that point, you've already made sure that the person who's going to be doing the will has the capacity to do a will. So that means legal capacity in terms of their age. So you have to be 18 to do a will. And then also the mental capacity to do a will. So you have to understand the nature and effect of the document you're creating. And as long as that's all in order, we can get started. So the will has to be in writing. You have to sign it, obviously. And for formal wills, you also need to have witnesses.
Okay.
So understanding how to create a proper will is an important step, obviously. If you're working with a lawyer, which I do recommend, then they'll walk you through all that. But there are things that you need to consider outside of that a lot of people don't necessarily know about if they're trying to draft their own wills.
So is there a barrier as to who can be a witness?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
There are certain people who you should not have as witnesses. If you have a beneficiary under the will as a witness, that is not good. You also shouldn't have anyone that you're naming in the will for anything as a witness. And typically, if you're doing it with a lawyer, they will act as one of the witnesses and have their assistant act as the other witness. So that piece is all taken care of. And essentially, we just make sure that all the legal formalities are in place that, a person who is trying to draft their own will might not be aware of.
That's incredible. So, I like how you started here to say, look, find out what you have, find out what it is that you're talking about, get someone who is going to be a witness. These are the first starting blocks. That's great. Why don't we take, I'm jumping ahead here, but what about, okay, I got all that ready for you, Christianne. I've given you a call. We've set up an appointment. What are we expecting in those types of meetings now?
Yeah, good question. So we're going to have a chat during the first meeting, and we're going to talk about what your assets are. So we're going to talk about real estate, your personal property, bank account, investments, and we're going to talk about what we want to pass, what we call inside the estate. So that's the stuff that we're going to put in the will, and what stuff it makes sense to pass outside of the estate, which we won't talk about in the will, but we need to separate those two categories. Typically, the things you would pass outside of the estate, depending on who your beneficiaries are, it's pretty common to pass registered investments to spouses, life insurance directly to spouses. Often the right of survivorship comes in with jointly owned property with spouses, but naming people other than your spouses in those situations isn't always a good idea. So it's important to have those conversations with your lawyer and your financial advisors to essentially make sure that the estate plan is achieving what you think it's achieving and that you're not accidentally messing things
Yeah,
up.
absolutely. That's a good question. Not to plug what we do from a financial advisory standpoint, but what should people expect as the role of their financial advisor in this case?
Yeah, I think the sign of someone who knows what they're talking about is the ability to say who is appropriate to put in those types of beneficiary designations, and especially when it comes to minors, not directly naming minors as beneficiaries, because you want those assets to flow through your estate, through your will for the trusts that you're likely setting up for minors in your will.
Okay.
So yeah, I think there's a lot to be aware of and a lot of things that you can accidentally do wrong if you're not working with professionals.
So a question that I'm trying to get ahead. Okay, what would someone ask listening to this? Going back, witness and executor, same person, different person. What would that look like?
Yeah, so the executor should not be one of the witnesses. There are a lot of things to think about when you're choosing your executor. Often people think that it's an honor to be chosen as an executor, which in some ways it is because it shows that you're really trusted, but it also is a lot of work. So you need to really think about if the person you're choosing to be the executor is a good fit for the role. Are they going to have time to do this significant amount of work? You also want to make sure that they're someone you really trust, because they are going to be dealing with your whole estate after you pass. It's great if they're organized because they need to be able to do an accounting of everything and be able to say where everything's gone and manage the beneficiaries and all that kind of stuff. So organizational skills are great, but probably just as important as that are communication skills, because a lot of beneficiaries think that they should get access to the funds immediately. So-and-so's passed away, where's my inheritance? And executor, why are you taking so long to get me my money? But often the delays are not the executor's fault. It's just things don't always happen as quickly as people want them to happen because they don't understand the process. So having good communication skills is really important for an executor. Their ability to be impartial in the situation is also really important. especially if they're acting as trustee over any trusts for multiple beneficiaries. Making sure that they have some degree of financial literacy is also a bonus. They don't have to be an expert. They can hire experts like you guys to help them manage the assets.
This is where I wish, when Vicky does the editing here, if there was a sparkle and shine. Yeah, exactly. Just an aura over the two of us. Yeah,
exactly.
But thank you for that. But true, it's just bringing the right people that are going to be doing the right things, right? As opposed to, okay, I think this person would do a good job and I can go buy a will kit at 7-Eleven and let's get going, right? And the road to a bad place is usually paved with good intentions. Yeah. But it's almost like risk. No one questions it until after the fact it's happened. Yeah. No one questions the validity of a will or an executor until after it's happened.
Yeah, so a lot of people that we get coming in are people who've recently lost a loved one, and they've seen the havoc that is created by not having a proper will or power of attorney or personal directive in place. So often that it's unfortunate that people almost need to have that experience in order to see the value in the documents, but I think it's wise to plan ahead if you can, and give these things the attention that they deserve well before you need them. Yeah. So, thinking about all of those types of factors for your executor is an important part of that process. And I think that if you're considering doing a will, but you're not sure who you would pick as an executor, I would just say don't let that be a stumbling block, because there are ways that I can help you talk that through and identify different potential parties for the role and the pros and cons of each. And we can also explore professional executor services. Yeah. There are a lot of professional executors out there who do an amazing job, and you can find the right fit for that too. So don't let that be a stumbling block.
That's a good point, and I hope one of, if not the many takeaways from today is what to expect when they see someone like you as well. Is that, okay, so we've outlined the advice you've given today is, okay, you have the idea, try to get as much as you want in order. What happens with the disbursement of the estate? Who would we like to have as witnesses? Who's a good candidate for an executor? Not everyone has to have everything known, because then they're going to come see you and then you're talking through a lot of these things and really filling in all of those gaps and giving that expert advice. Yeah. After the first consultation, or however it becomes, let's say now we're at the point we have everything in order. Perfect. What's the next step now?
Okay, so once we figured out what all the assets are, the next step really is to figure out how you want to distribute them. So who are the beneficiaries going to be? What are the needs of those beneficiaries? Who do you owe legal obligations to? Who do you feel that you owe a moral obligation to? Identifying if there are unique factors for any of those beneficiaries, like if they're minors, what types of things do we need in place? What kind of trusts do we need to set up to make sure that they're taken care of properly? If there are beneficiaries with disabilities, we need to be careful that we're not, taking away their ability to collect government assistance with what you're providing them. So make sure there are the appropriate trusts in place for that. Making sure your spouse is appropriately taken care of. In other provinces, sometimes people have obligations to take care of their parents. That's not the case in Alberta, but just being aware of who you do owe obligations to is another important part of the conversation, so that we can make sure the beneficiaries are set up how you want them and that everybody's on the same page about any special circumstances that might need to be addressed with those beneficiaries.
Okay. All great information. Let's just say right now, for the sake of the pod, I have it. This is the will. If we can have video. Like, it is done. It's in this yellow legal paper. I'm sure it comes a little bit different. It's finished. It's settled. Mm-hmm. You shelf it.
Right.
But do you?
Okay, so have we signed this yellow legal pad
We've
yet?
signed.
We've signed. We've got the witnesses. Okay. Yeah. So it's important that you store your will in an appropriate place, because Sometimes people store them in their bank safety deposit boxes, and then when they need to access it, well, they don't need to access it because they're gone, unfortunately, but their executor needs to access it, but they can't get the bank to open
Oh my goodness.
the safety deposit box because the document that says that this person has the authority to open the safety deposit box is actually inside the safety deposit box. And so sometimes that can be a real problem. A lot of lawyers will offer will storage, but wherever you decide to keep your will, it is really important that you tell your executor and your backup executor where that document
Gotcha.
is so that they have access to it. And I personally also like to send out letters to the people who are appointed as executor, just letting them know that they've been appointed with this role, so that they have my contact information as well in case something happens and then they need to reach out. So that's the important part about wills storage. Unfortunately, Alberta does not have a wills registry, which would be amazing. Maybe I will start one, but it would be super helpful.
We'll cut that out so no one takes your idea.
Yeah.
We'll edit that one out. You bet.
Okay.
Yeah. I like that. Will storage and registry. Okay.
Yeah. So there we go. Business ideas all over the place.
I like it.
Okay, so basically it's just really important to let your executors know where the will is being kept.
Okay. Excellent stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of updating, so we have the process from its inception, the ideas, coming to see you, drafting it, formatting it, letting the executors know it's in place, the legal paper signed, and how often should we be revisiting this?
Yeah, that's a really good question because a lot of people think, I've done my will, I don't need to ever think about it again. And sometimes that's fine, you don't need to. But majority of the time, people's lives and circumstances evolve and change. And really, anytime there's a major life change, you should revisit your will. A lot of the kind of, red flags that it's time for an update would be a change in your marital status. Maybe you've had children or your children have now turned into adults and they would be appropriate to name as executors instead of, your sibling who might pass around the same time as you. So there are lots of life events that should trigger a review of your estate plan. Changes in the law is another big one. Sometimes if the law changes and the tax efficiencies you thought you had built in are no longer going to work, that one's a little trickier to stay on top of. So I think it's a good idea to stay in touch with your estate lawyer. So if there are major changes in the legislation, then you can touch base with them and figure out how to navigate that. But yeah, a lot of people also think that the changes they're making to the will are not that significant, so they don't want to redo a whole will. They think that maybe a codicil would be appropriate. So just for background, for those who don't know, a codicil is a legal document that amends your prior will. So while sometimes codicils are okay, I don't generally do them or recommend them because they add a layer of complexity for things to go wrong. So if the codicil goes missing, or if you think that you've changed your will by, writing on it yourself, you probably haven't done an effective codicil. You probably just messed up your will.
Yeah, interesting.
And there are a lot of things that can go wrong when you do codicils. So I think that if it's time to make a change because you need to, you've had a life change and you need to update your estate plan, it makes sense to go through all of the process again and determine what else is impacted by this life change, because chances are when you go through the process again, you're going to see that it's more than just the small thing you thought it was that you're going to need to change.
Yeah, that's such a great point and great points as well as, there may not be do it every 5 years, but identifying the change. And it sounds like in cases that codicil can be just a Band-Aid fix, if even a fix at all.
Yeah.
Saying, even to me, listening to, I didn't think, well, what if that does go missing, or what if it's in that same lockbox or underneath the mattress, because we can't tell anyone what's going on until, until we pass away. So, we'll move into, we'll cut this episode down because you're sticking around. And for those that are listening, we're doing a 2-parter, and it's really going to be what happens next. So the probate, what to actually expect during that time. But for this episode, thank you so much for your time. Biggest takeaway for me and for those listening is this is why professionals like Christianne exist. This is why you are here. You don't need to know everything right off the gate. It's a collaboration. You're there to be that sound counsel and help get these important documents done. Don't be part of the 50%.
Yes.
Don't be part, which is still staggering.
Yeah.
Anything that I've missed?
No, I think that's great. Thanks for having me, as always. And we'll chat on our next episode.
Yeah. Which is not right after this. It's in the weeks to come. Stay tuned,
stay tuned.
right? Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Christianne. Thanks.